Sahitam Krishna Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamsya Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Nitinamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratvishe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Okay, so we had finished the 6th chapter last time. So we'll proceed on to the 7th chapter. In the 6th chapter, we saw the list of various angas of bhakti. So there are 64 angas of bhakti. And we also discussed about principles and details. So all these 64 angas of bhakti are principles. All right.
Yeah.
And amongst these, the first 20 are important. The first 10 are pravritti, things to do, and the next 10 are nivritti, what are to be avoided. Okay, we also discussed on how to know what to change, what not to change. And so just to revise this important statement, to foolishly mistake a non-adjustable principle for an adjustable detail will cause havoc in spiritual life. What can you see on the screen?
Same thing, Prabhuji.
Same screen, same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah. Okay.
What?
Principle or detail that we are seeing.
Okay, fine. To foolishly mistake a non-adjustable principle for an adjustable detail will cause havoc in spiritual life, and to accept each detail as if it can never be adjusted is fanaticism. So therefore, we should always confirm our opinions with trusted friends or superiors. Okay, so now we're going to chapter 7, evidence regarding devotional principles. So Rupa Goswami is now describing all these 64 angas of bhakti, and he is giving us various evidences from various scriptures in order to show the authenticity of each of these angas of bhakti. So the first one is Adav Guru Pada Ashraya, accepting the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. So in this regard, Rupa Goswami is quoting from the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd chapter, verse number 21. This is the conversation between Nav Yogendras and Maharaj Nimi. Prabuddha, one of the Nav Yogendras, is speaking to Maharaj Nimi. Tasmad Gurum Prapadyeta Jigyasu Shreya Uttamam Shabde Parecha Nishnatam Brahman Yupashamashrayam. Therefore, any person who seriously desires real happiness must seek a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of the bona fide guru is that he has realized the conclusions of the scriptures by deliberation and is able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken shelter of the Supreme Godhead, leaving aside all material considerations, should be understood to be bona fide spiritual masters. Okay, so here he is explaining why one should approach a guru. Tasmad, Therefore, so this is in connection with the previous verse, which talks about getting out of material existence. So in order to get out of material existence, one must surrender to a guru and do what? Jigyasu. One must inquire. Inquire about what? Shreya. Shreyas and prayers. I'm sure everyone is aware of these two words, prayers and shreyas. Somebody can explain with an example the difference between prayers and shreyas. Yes, anyone?
Long-term benefit and prayers is for short-term gain.
Yes, give an example.
Like chanting is something we do for long-term benefit, and prayers is something that we are looking very short-term, like
so by chanting you don't get short-term benefit, no?
we get both, but it is mainly for long-term purification. I mean, it is to be done for long-term also. It's not a short-term activity.
Okay, what is Prabhupada's example for explaining prayers and shreyas? Prabhupada gives the example in so many lectures.
Krishna. Prayers is like giving enjoyment to the senses, and Shreyas is giving.
No, you're still talking philosophy. We are asking example. Now you all don't hear proper lectures regularly, it looks like, huh? Prabhupada gives the example in so many lectures. Now Bhakti Shastri course is about to get over. Such a simple question, you don't know the answer. What will people say? Anyone? What is the very simple example Prabhupada gave to explain prayers and shreyas? So Prabhupada's common example is prayers is a child who only wants to play. So that is prayers. So he just wants to play because that gives him immediate enjoyment. But the parents, they understand the long-term benefit of the child. So they tell him to study, go to school, study. So that is shreyas, because that is what is going to help him in the long term. So this is Srila Prabhupada's very common example. The other example also which Srila Prabhupada sometimes gives is just like a small child. A small child, you give him a chocolate and a 100 rupee note. So what does he choose? He chooses the chocolate because that's what gives him immediate enjoyment. And he fails to realize that with the 100 rupee note, actually he can get so many chocolates. So, but the common example which Srila Prabhupada very often gave is about the child who wants to play and doesn't want to go to school. So that's the common example. So here it's being said that one must approach the guru to inquire about shreyas. So just like, again, Arjuna, when he surrendered to Krishna, in the Bhagavad Gita, famous verse 2.7. What is the verse? 2.7? Yes, Karpanya dosho pahata svabhava prichami tvam dharma samura cheta yashreya. So there also the word is coming. Yashreya syan nishitam bruitan meshishyastayam shadmata. So therefore one must inquire about shreya, about one's long-term benefit. And what is the purpose of that? The purpose of that is uttamam. The purpose is to rise above tamas, to get out of the darkness of material existence. And what are the qualifications of such a spiritual master? Shabde parecha nishnatam. Shabda refers to spiritual sound vibration. Para means transcendental sound vibration. Nishnatam, so one who knows definitively by deliberation, he has understood the conclusion of all the scriptures. Brahmani Upashama Ashrayam. So Brahmani refers to the Supreme Brahman. Upa means close. So he has come close to the Supreme Brahman, to the Supreme Personality of Godhead by taking Ashrayam, by taking shelter. So one must surrender to such a spiritual master and inquire from him. Yes, so Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, only a person who has understood the futility of material sense gratification can approach a bona fide spiritual master. So, as Srila Prabhupada very often said, that accepting a spiritual master is not simply a matter of fashion, just like one keeps a dog. But only when one is serious about spiritual life, when one has understood that I want to give up this material sense gratification business, I want to go back home, back to Godhead. So one who has understood that, then he should approach the bona fide spiritual master. And then Srila Prabhupada's book, Srila Prabhupada is talking about some other qualifications of the bona fide spiritual master, which again, you have already studied in the Nectar of Instruction, Vacho Vegam, Manasukrodha Vegam, Jibba Vegam, Udarapasta Vegam, Etan Vegan Yo Vishaheta Dira, Sarma Abhimam Pritvam Sashishya. So Prabhupada is giving the translation of that. And at the end, Srila Prabhupada writes, to accept such a spiritual master is the crucial point for advancement in spiritual life. One who is fortunate enough to come under the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master is sure to traverse the path of spiritual salvation without any doubts. So the next anga of bhakti is accepting initiation from the spiritual master and receiving instructions from him. So in this context, Rupa Goswami is quoting the next verse of the 11th canto. Shri Krishna Dikshadi Shikshanam Yatha Tatraiva Tatra Bhagavatam Dharman Shikshet Guru Atma Devataha Amaya Yanu Vritya Yestu Shed Atma Atma Dohari. Acquiring knowledge after initiation. So this is from the 11th canto. Accepting the bona fide spiritual master as one's life and soul and worshipable deity, the disciple should learn from him the process of pure bhakti by sincere service. By that pure bhakti, the Lord, the Supreme Soul, will be satisfied and give himself to that devotee. Okay, so somebody can read from the book this point.
Prabhuji, first para.
Yes, accepting initiation from the spiritual master.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Accepting the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master.
No, there's the next one. Accepting initiation from the spiritual master.
Okay, sorry. Accepting initiation from the spiritual master and receiving instructions from him. Sage Prabuddha continued to speak to the king as follows. My dear king, a disciple has to accept the spiritual master, not only as spiritual master, but also as the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Super Soul. In other words, the disciple should accept the spiritual master as God because he is the external manifestation of Krishna. This is confirmed in every scripture, and a disciple should accept the spiritual master as such. One should learn Srimad Bhagavatam seriously and with all respect and veneration for the spiritual master. Hearing and speaking Srimad Bhagavatam is the religious process which elevates one to the platform of serving and loving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The attitude of the disciple should be to satisfy the bona fide spiritual master. Then it will be very easy for him to understand spiritual knowledge. This is confirmed in the Vedas. And Rupa Goswami will further explain that for a person who has unflinching faith in God and the spiritual master, everything becomes revealed very easily.
Yes. So here, so after initiation, so how one must receive instructions from the spiritual master that is being explained over here. So one must accept the bona fide spiritual master as one's life and soul and worshipable deity. Okay, so in the famous verse, in the 2nd chapter of the Gita, verse number 42, Vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha kurunandana bhaushaka yanantasya buddhayo vyavasayinam So in the commentary to that verse, Srila Vishwanath Thakur, he says that one must make the instructions of the spiritual master as one's life and soul. And in all circumstances, whether samsara is there, whether samsara is not there, in all circumstances, one must accept the instructions of the spiritual master as life-saving medicine. That is how seriously one must take the instructions of the spiritual master. So we know that that's the commentary which really inspired Srila Prabhupada to accept the instructions of his spiritual master as his life and soul. And then we know how Srila Prabhupada, he took so much difficulty to execute the instructions of his spiritual master. So that should be the attitude. So as is being said over here, that the disciple should learn from him the process of pure bhakti by sincere service. So that is how one can actually learn. So learning in spiritual life is not just a theoretical academic exercise. Just like in the material world, people go to schools and colleges, learn from the books, and they may go to the classes sometimes. But essentially, people learn from the books, write exams, and that's the end of it. But spiritual knowledge is not like that. Therefore, Krishna also in the Bhagavad Gita 4:34, he says, Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshantite jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. So the process of devotional service or receiving knowledge, spiritual knowledge, is very much based upon satisfying Guru and Krishna. As Srila Prabhupada is writing over here, the attitude of the disciple should be to satisfy the bona fide spiritual master. Then it will be very easy for him to understand spiritual knowledge. So, also in the everyday in Guru Puja we sing, Divya Gyan Hriday Prakashito. The spiritual knowledge is revealed within the heart of the disciple. Just like in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna again and again says that this is a very confidential knowledge. In the 4th chapter of the Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, Bhakto sime sakacheti rahasyam etad uttamam. There he uses the word rahasyam, it is a mystery. And again in the 9th chapter, 2nd verse, Raja Vidya, Raja Guhyam. So it is said to be very confidential. And again in the 18th chapter also he says, Guhyatara Guhyatamam. So what is this confidential thing that Krishna speaks about in the Bhagavad Gita again and again? So what is so confidential? Bhagavad Gita is available everywhere. Anybody can buy Bhagavad Gita. What to speak of buy? Devotees are distributing, sometimes distributing free also. So Bhagavad Gitas are available in abundance everywhere. So what is so confidential? What is the confidential mystery of the message of the Gita? Can someone say?
The devotional service unto Supreme Lord Bhakti.
Okay, devotional service to Supreme Lord. But that also Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. Man mana bhavamat bhakto. So many things Krishna is saying.
It is not explicit.
Bhaktya mam abhijanati ya vanyas chasmi tattvata. Very clear. So what is confidential?
The soul and the super soul.
What happened to the soul and super soul?
The super soul is situated as Paramatma in our hearts and how we are connected with it.
Okay, fine. That also Krishna has said, Sarvasya chaham hridi sanavishto matta smriti jnana ponam cha. He said that I'm situated in the heart.
The constitutional position of the soul as eternal servant of the Supreme Lord, that is the confidential information.
Okay, that also Krishna has said, Mamaivaamsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana.
Said it, but people are not getting it.
Huh?
He said it, but people are not getting it. People are not understanding. And that can be understood only under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. So
Okay, that's a good answer. That's a good answer.
Only one
Now-
who is devoted to Krishna can understand.
Can understand what? That is the question.
The knowledge.
Theoretical we can application.
Surrendering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then only he can understand
the
the
way
soul and
Prabhuji.
Can
super soul.
understand what?
Knowledge of the soul and super soul.
Knowledge of the soul and the super soul.
how to go back to Godhead.
Prabhuji, just want to add. Bhaktosmi Saka Cheti Rahasyam Etaduttamam. So,
So that is what our question is. Our question is, what is the rahasya?
So,
The secret path to go back to Godhead
We are not the body, we are the soul.
is only by surrender to the Supreme Lord under a guidance of bona fide spiritual master.
Okay, fine. So as some of you have said and indicated, so yes, the knowledge is available. In Bhagavad Gita, so many verses, Krishna has again and again said, especially in the second chapter, you're not the body of the soul. How many of us can confidently say that we have totally realized this? How many times have we heard it? Are we totally on the soul platform?
No, Prabhuji.
I don't know. But the point is, the theoretical knowledge is available in the book. But in order to act on the platform of the soul, in order to act on the platform of being an eternal servant of Krishna, that requires realization. And so therefore, Krishna speaks about Jnana Vigyan. 6th chapter, Jnana, 6th chapter, 8th verse. So you can read that verse and purport very carefully later on. Jnana Vijnana Triptatma. So there in that purport, Srila Prabhupada is very beautifully explaining what is Jnana and what is Vijnana. So Srila Prabhupada begins that purport by saying, simply bookish knowledge without realization is useless. Why? Because Ata Shri Krishna Namadi na bhaved grayam indriye sevon mukhehi jivvado swayam eva spuratyada. The supreme absolute truth cannot be understood by one's blunt material senses, which includes one's material mind and intelligence. One cannot understand the Supreme Lord. So therefore, simply by reading the book and simply by memorizing verses, by scholarship, by all this, one cannot understand. One may read, but still it remains a mystery, because one will not be able to apply unless there is realization, and realization comes by grace. So without the grace, without the mercy of Guru and Krishna, one may read the Bhagavad Gita 1,000 times and yet not be able to apply anything. And on the other hand, we have the South Indian Brahmin at Srirangam, who was trying to read the Gita every day, all 18 chapters. He was illiterate. He could not read. But yet, when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came there, so he asked him that, my dear Brahman, why are you trying to read the Bhagavad Gita even though you cannot? So many people are making fun of you. So what did he say? What did the Brahman say?
The Brahman said that he could explain perfectly the cover page of the Bhagavad Gita. He could explain the position. What is the position? He was saying
No,
wait.
wait.
He was sorry. I just he was saying that even though Arjuna was a bhakta, Supreme Lord is serving his devotee.
No,
actually.
when he was asked, why are you reading? Why are you reading every day? What was the answer?
That answer was, he was saying that his spiritual master instructed him. That's
Correct.
why he's reading that without his knowing what is there in it actually.
Correct.
Everybody was
Even though
laughing.
he could not read, but still because his spiritual master instructed him, therefore he was trying to read. And then Mahaprabhu asked him, okay, you're trying to read, but then why the tears in your eyes? In fact, Chaitanya Charitamrita describes that he was exhibiting all symptoms of ecstasy, even though he could not understand a word of the Gita. And then he describes that every time I read, then I see Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has become a charioteer for his devotee Arjuna. So he had the full realization of the Supreme Lord. He was having the darshan of the Lord. And of course, the Supreme Lord actually came to give him darshan in the form of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then Mahaprabhu certified, you have actually understood the essence of the Gita. So without going through Bhakti Shastri course, he got a certificate from the Supreme Lord. You have actually understood the Gita. Why? Because he was sincerely trying to follow the instructions of the spiritual master. So, when one sincerely tries to follow the instructions of the spiritual master, then even though one may not be a big scholar, even though one may not know so many verses of the Gita and Bhagavatam, but still, as again Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita itself, 10:11, Tesham satyuktanam bhajadam pritipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam ye namam pyantite tesham evanukam partam aham ajnanajam tama nashyamyatma bhavasto jnana deepena bhasvata. So this is what Krishna does. When he sees the sincerity of a devotee in trying to serve the spiritual master, then Krishna reveals everything from within and gives the ultimate realization. And that is what Srila Prabhupada is saying over here. The attitude of the disciple should be to satisfy the bona fide spiritual master. Again, in the preface to the Nectar of Instruction, Srila Prabhupada writes that very important and beautiful statement. What is that? In regards to attitude, advancement of a candidate in Krishna consciousness depends upon the attitude of its follower. So it depends on the service attitude. What is one's attitude to serve? How enthusiastic one is to serve and follow the instructions of the spiritual master. This is the crux of the matter in devotional service. Okay, then somebody will say, okay, I will serve the Diksha Guru. Okay, all what is important for me is the Diksha Guru. So Diksha Guru mostly is a few thousand miles away. And anyway, he is not available. He doesn't give me any instructions also. Then what is that? What instructions to follow? And what is there to please? Okay, I'll do everything independently, and my guru is not. So what's the understanding?
Vani Seva.
What was that?
Vani Seva.
Yes, Vani Seva. That's correct. But if somebody says, anyway, Guru does not give me any personal instructions, so what Vani?
Shiksha Guru?
No, instructions given in all his writings and preachings are Vani only.
So the instructions are definitely available in the lectures. So the lectures are filled with so many instructions. So aren't they personal instructions?
Even all the purports of Bhagavatam and all the books are also his instructions.
Yes, that is the other place to get instructions. Srila Prabhupada is our founder Acharya. He is the preeminent Shiksha Guru for all devotees within ISKCON. And so Srila Prabhupada's purports are filled with instructions. That is another point. And there is another important point, which again Mahaprabhu has emphasized in our philosophy. What is that? Is it that we have to receive instructions only from the Diksha Guru? What is the other important Siddhanta which Mahaprabhu has taught us?
Sankirtan, chanting is one instruction.
Well, that's a common instruction, that's true. What is the important Siddhanta in regards to following instructions?
Sharing with devotees. Guhyamakyate prachati.
So how do we receive instructions? So if the Diksha Guru doesn't give us any instructions, then from whom should we receive instructions?
By inquiring with the devotees.
Okay, your point is quite close.
You can work with your God brothers
And senior devotees.
and senior devotees.
Yes. So the Siddhanta which Mahaprabhu has taught us is Gopi Bhartur Padakamalyor Das 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 Anudas. Servant of the servant of the servants in Parampara. So therefore, if the Diksha Guru may not give us any personal instructions, but there are the representatives of the Diksha Guru, the representatives of the GBC in the form of temple presidents, our service authorities, senior devotees. So their instructions are as good as the instructions of the Diksha Guru. That is the Siddhanta. Not that, oh, my Diksha Guru doesn't give me any instructions, so I relax. No instructions, so no problem, I relax. Of course, as already we discussed, the instructions are definitely available in the books and the lectures. The instructions are definitely there. So many instructions. We are having a tough time trying to follow those instructions which are already there. And still sometimes devotees complain, oh, I'm not getting any personal instructions. Why? There are so many personal instructions. Why they're not personal? And then plus we have the important Siddhanta of Das, Das and Udas. Srila Prabhupada in his lectures, he says, 100 times Das. The more one becomes Das and Udas, the more mercy one receives. That is the Siddhanta. So not that we have to get instructions directly from the Diksha Guru. No, down the line, anyone gives us instructions, we should be enthusiastic to follow, right? So then when one has that service attitude, this is the meaning of attitude. The attitude of the disciple should be to satisfy the bona fide spiritual master. So this sentence is what we are discussing. This one sentence, apparently simple, has such a depth of meaning. So that is the essence of spiritual life, this attitude of the disciple that decides the advancement of a devotee in Krishna consciousness. What is the service attitudes? How eager am I to serve? There is that famous story of Sripad Ramanacharya, when his disciple Dashrathi came to ask him, what is the meaning of Sarvadharman Parityajya verse? You may know that story. And then later on, after some days, Ramanacharya's some relative, I'm forgetting, niece or somebody, she was having difficulty at home and doing all her household chores. And then he sends Dashrathi to help her in the village. And he was sent to the village and he was doing all menial services there, fetching water from the well and helping in the cooking and getting the firewoods. He was a big scholar. So that was the explanation to the Sarvadharman Parityajya verse that Ramanacharya wanted to teach him. Again, we have the famous example of Sandipani Muni and Krishna and Sudama serving him in the Gurukul. So we know when Sudama met Krishna at Dwaraka, then Krishna is recollecting this incident that took place in the Gurukul. What was the incident that he recalled? Yes, anyone? Krishna's pastimes. What was the incident that Krishna recalls?
Regarding the puffed rice which Sudama was hiding.
Puffed rice Sudama brought, that is true. But then Krishna and Sudama began to talk. And then Krishna began to recollect the childhood days.
They went in forest and he ate all this chane.
What? They went to the forest. Then what happened?
I think they went. They were asked by their guru to go to the forest, and I don't know what was there to bring woods or so, and then there it was raining all night, and then they were narrating that how difficult like it was, like all night they were there in the forest, and so that's what I think.
And he ate. The guru gave something, and only Sudama ate everything. He didn't give it to Krishna.
Oh, this is from which scripture?
I think it's Bhagavatam only somewhere.
Okay, don't think too much. So anyway, we never read of something to eat and all that. So anyway, so they were getting the wood, and then it was raining heavily. There was a huge storm, and they were stuck in the forest. And throughout the night, they were wet, holding the logs of wood. And the next morning, Sandipani Muni came searching for his disciples. And when he saw Krishna and Sudama drenched from the rain, holding the logs of wood on the head, so Sandipani Muni was very pleased. And Sandipani Muni said that in this world, most people are only interested in their own sense gratification. There are very few people who selflessly want to serve others, but both of you are selflessly serving. Therefore, he gives them the benediction. He gives them a blessing. Of course, Krishna does not require blessings, but he's playing the role of a disciple. So therefore, Sandipani Muni blessed them that whatever they have learned in the ashram, they will never forget. And Srila Prabhupada explains that that is the way to receive spiritual knowledge, by the blessings of the Guru. And that's what it said over here. By sincere service, by service attitude, one receives the blessings of the Guru. And that's how one actually receives transcendental knowledge. That's how the knowledge is revealed within the heart. And then one is actually able to apply that knowledge within one's heart. So that's the way of receiving transcendental knowledge. And that's what Prabhupada is writing over here. So that service attitude is what is so very important. And that is the reason why we find these early disciples of Srila Prabhupada, most of them hippies, but who do not know anything about Krishna or no Vedic culture, nothing. But they had that firm faith in Srila Prabhupada. And because they had that firm faith in Srila Prabhupada and they followed his instructions, they made rapid progress in Krishna consciousness. And that's what Prabhupada is writing here. The attitude of the disciple should be to satisfy the bona fide spiritual master. Not that one is arguing with the spiritual master and justifying and doing so many things, and there's hardly any attitude to serve. By that, one may be a big scholar, but that scholarship will be useless in spiritual advancements. That's what Prabhupada says. Then it will be very easy for him to understand spiritual knowledge. When the spiritual master is satisfied with the service attitude. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada also quoted this verse from the Shvetashwara Upanishad many times. Yasya deve parabhaktir yatha deve tata gurau tasyete katitai artha prakashante mahatmanaha. So unto those who have implicit faith in the instructions of both the spiritual master and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yasya deve parabhaktir yatha deve tata gurau. As much faith in the Supreme Lord, same faith in the spiritual master's instructions. Then when one has that faith and follows, then tasyeta katithai artha, the meaning of all the Vedic injunctions, prakashante, they will be revealed. That is how one actually realizes spiritual knowledge and applies in one's life. Otherwise, it will simply remain on a theoretical platform and one will not be able to make any progress. So therefore, that proper service attitude to serve the instructions of the spiritual master very sincerely, that is paramount importance to progress in spiritual life. Again, Prabhupada writes, Prabhupada is giving the translation of that same verse. For a person who has unflinching faith in God and the spiritual master, everything becomes revealed very easily. Okay, read this from the screen. This is a quote from the Chaitanya Chaitanya. Okay, this is the next anga of bhakti, serving spiritual master with faith and confidence. But of course, we already sort of covered it in our discussions. But now somebody can first read from the book.
Serving the spiritual master with faith and confidence. Regarding accepting initiation from the spiritual master in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 17th chapter, verse 27, it is stated by Lord Krishna, "My dear Uddhava, the spiritual master must be accepted not only as my representative, but as my very self. He must never be considered on the same level with an ordinary human being. One should never be envious of the spiritual master as one may be envious of an ordinary man. The spiritual master should always be seen as representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and by serving the spiritual master, one is able to serve all the demigods."
Yes, so this is a very important verse which the Lord himself is speaking to Uddhav. Acharya mam vijaniyan nava manyeta karhichit. So Krishna is saying the Acharya is as good as my very self. Acharya mam vijanya. Know that the Acharya is myself. That is how the Acharya is a very, very intimate associate of the Supreme Lords. And so he says, Nava manyeta karhichit. Never one should disrespect such a bona fide spiritual master. So therefore, that is how one must know the position of the Acharya. Very, very close to the Supreme Lord, that the Supreme Lord is saying is as good as myself. And so I'm requesting everyone, you can read the purport to that, this verse in the Bhagavatam. You refer to this Bhagavatam verse 11, 17, 27. And in the purport to that, you'll find a reference to the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Srila Prabhupada has given a commentary to that verse. So it's a very important commentary. So you can go through that. Okay. So now we have another verse purport on the screen, so somebody can read that.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare.
Serving spiritual master with faith and confidence. The criterion is that a devotee must know what Krishna wants him to do. This understanding can be achieved through the medium of a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Krishna. Srila Rupa Goswami advises Ado Guru Ashrayam. One who is serious in wanting to render pure devotional service to the Lord must take shelter of a spiritual master who comes in the disciplic succession from Krishna. Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshiyo viduhu. Bhagavad Gita 4.2. Without accepting a bona fide spiritual master coming in the disciplic succession, one cannot find out the real purpose of devotional service. Therefore, one has to accept the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and agree to be directed by him. The first business of a pure devotee is to satisfy his spiritual master, whose only business is to spread Krishna consciousness. And if one can satisfy the spiritual master, Krishna is automatically satisfied. Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasadaha.
Yes, so here the important sentence is that one has to accept the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and agree to be directed by him. So it's not that one has a spiritual master and one is hardly interested in following the instructions. No. So one has to agree to be directed by him. And then the first business is to satisfy the spiritual master. Okay, so now this is another very important quote. This is in connection to Bharat Maharaj. Bharat Maharaj's fall down. So we know past time of Bharat Maharaj, how he got attached to the deer and then he had to take the body for deer. So this is in that connection. So read.
The incident herein described is very significant. In a previous verse, it is stated, Vina Mahat Pada Rajo Abhishekam. One cannot attain perfection without smearing the dust from the lotus feet of an exalted devotee on his head. If one always follows the orders of the spiritual master, there is no question of falling down. As soon as a foolish disciple tries to overtake his spiritual master and becomes ambitious to occupy his post, he immediately falls down. Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasado, yasya prasada nagati kutopi. If the spiritual master is considered an ordinary man, the disciple surely loses his chance to advance further. Despite a very rigid life in devotional service, Bharata Maharaj did not consult a spiritual master when he became overly attached to a deer. Consequently, he became strongly attached to the deer and forgetting his spiritual routine, he fell down.
Yes. So here, Srila Prabhupada is writing some very important statements. If one always follows the orders of the spiritual master, there is no question of falling down. So if one always follows, then there's no question, because then one will always receive protection. The protection, the mercy from the spiritual master depends upon following the instructions. So if one is always following, then yes, then one will always receive the protection. So, so if the disciple becomes ambitious to occupy his post. That means one is wanting to occupy the post of the spiritual master, or one is thinking oneself to be on par with the spiritual master. So then if one thinks like that, then where is the question of following? If one thinks I'm as good as a spiritual master, then where is the question of following? So therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has shown us the example, which Srila Prabhupada often quoted, and that is one must always consider oneself a fool in front of the spiritual master. Not that one is foolish, but one considers oneself ignorant. Then one will be eager to receive instructions and follow them. That's the proper mood. So if one thinks I'm over smart, I'm smarter than my spiritual master, then that's the beginning of his fall down. So therefore, what is very important is that one always be in the mood of wanting to serve the spiritual master. So Prabhupada is mentioning that one of the reasons why Bharat Maharaj fell down is he did not consult the spiritual master when he became overly attached to the deer. Okay, fine. So now we go to the next Anga of Bhakti. Following in the footsteps of saintly persons, Sadhu Marganu Gamanam. Again, Prabhupada quoted this very often. So in this connection, there is this statement from the Brahma Yamala, which says that even if a person seems to have attained steadiness in practicing pure bhakti to the Lord, that bhakti is a misfortune if it rejects the rules of Shruti, Smriti, Purana, and Pancharatra due to lack of faith in them. So again, this is a famous verse. Shruti, Smriti, Purana, Adi, Pancharatra, Vidim Vina, Ekantiki Harer Bhaktir Utpataiva Kalpate. So if one is practicing bhakti, but if that bhakti is not according to the rules and regulations of Shruti, Smriti, Purana, Pancharatra, Vidim Vina, if it is not according to the rules and regulations of the scriptures, then the result will be Ekantiki Harer Bhakti. So Ekantiki, one is performing devotional service, which is Ekantiki, which is not in accordance, which is alone. Alone means not in accordance to the rules and regulations of the scripture. The result is Utpataiva Kalpate. Utpat. Utpat means chaos. Chaos in society. So that's what happens because of the Sergius. The Sergius, they make the devotional service very cheap. They pretend to be very exalted, advanced devotees, but they don't follow rules and regulations. And so then, because they make a big show of being advanced devotees, many people tend to follow them. And then they get misled on the wrong path. And so many people get deviated from the right path. So that's how there is utpat. There is chaos in society because of the Sergius, which the Prabhupada is talking about. So you can see in the book. So after this quote from Brahma Yamala, Prabhupada writes about the Sergius. Instead, he will simply create disturbances for the sincere students of devotional service. Those who do not strictly follow the principles of revealed scriptures are generally called Sergius. Those who have imagined everything to be cheap, who have their own concocted ideas and who do not follow the scripture injunctions. Such persons are simply creating disturbances in the discharge of devotional service. So then Srila Prabhupada also speaks about Lord Buddha and the Buddhists. Why? Because they also don't follow scriptures. Lord Buddha rejected the Vedas. We know that. But then there was a specific purpose why he did that. And then, of course, Lord Buddha tricked the atheistic people to follow him. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada is describing about Buddha. You can read that. Okay, so now we are not reading all these items. Some of these angas of bhakti are small and easy to understand, so you can read them on your own. So we will go to observing fasting on Ekadashi. Somebody read from the book, Observing Fasting on Ekadashi.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Observing fasting on Ekadashi. In the Brahma Vivarta Purana, it is said that one who observes fasting on Ekadashi day is freed from all kinds of reactions to sinful activities and advances in pious life. The basic principle is not just to fast, but to increase one's faith and love for Govinda or Krishna. The real reason for observing fasting on Ekadashi is to minimize the demands of the body and to engage our time in the service of the Lord by chanting or performing similar service. The best thing to do on fasting days is to remember the pastimes of Govinda and to hear his holy name constantly.
Yes. So one must know what is the purpose of fasting. The basic principle is not just to fast, but to increase one's faith and love for Govinda or Krishna. So the real reason for observing fasting is to minimize demands of body, engage our time in the service of the Lord by chanting or performing similar service. So one must know very well what is the purpose of the fasting. The important point is not just fasting. The important point is what? What is the important goal?
Increase faith and love for Govinda.
Increasing service, increasing devotional service. That's the main point. Not that, oh, every Ekadashi I fast, nirjal. What do? I sleep. That is useless. That type of fasting is useless. The purpose of the fasting is not just fasting. The purpose of the fasting is to increase one's service. So therefore, if one is not able to totally fast, or if one is not able to fast from all types of prasad, then Srila Prabhupada said, okay, take some prasad, Ekadashi prasad, take some Ekadashi prasad and do more service. Doing more service is what is more important. So just like very soon this Nirjal Ekadashi is coming on 11th of June. So sometimes devotees get so fanatic about doing Nirjal, they are ready to get admitted to the hospital, but they will not give up the Nirjal. So that type of fasting is useless. So therefore we find that Srila Prabhupada was never fanatic about these austerities and this fasting. Srila Prabhupada was never fanatic about it. The main focus was on preaching. The main focus was on service. That's what is more important. And so along with the fasting, if we are able to render more service, then it is good. But what is more important is to render service, to increase the chanting. That is what is more important. Not that in the name of fasting, one gets so tired that one is not able to chant, one is not able to do service, nothing. That type of fasting is useless. So then it is better to eat something, some Ekadashi prasad, and do some active service. That will please Guru and Krishna more than just sleeping and not doing anything. So therefore, one must know the purpose of the rules and regulations. As we already discussed, what is the purpose of all rules and regulations?
To do devotional service.
What is the underlying principle behind all rules and regulations?
To remember Krishna, never forget Krishna.
Yes. Smartavya Satam Vishnu Vismartavya Najatuchit Sarve Vidhi Nishedasyor Etayor Eva Kinkaraha. All rules and regulations are subservient to this one rule and regulation, and that is always remember Krishna and never forget him. That is the purpose which one must not forget. So similarly, the purpose of fasting on Ekadashi is definitely to increase the remembrance of Krishna. That is the purpose. Not that I'm doing Nirjal and not increasing remembrance of Krishna, I'm just sleeping. That is not the purpose. So therefore, there is no point in such fanatic observance of fasting and things like that. Therefore, the goal must always be kept in mind. Okay, offering respect to the banyan tree. Many times devotees ask this question. Okay, in ISKCON we don't worship banyan tree, but you can see, you can read below that what Prabhupada is writing. Somebody read.
Hare Krishna. Offering respect to the banyan trees. In this Skanda Purana, it is directed that a devotee should offer water to the tulsi plant and amakala trees. He should offer respect to the cows and to the brahmanas and should serve the Vaishnavas by offering them respectful obeisances and meditating upon them. All of these processes will help the devotee to diminish the reactions to his past sinful activities.
So you see, in the whole, under this offering respect to banyan tree, is there any mention of banyan tree by Srila Prabhupada below?
No.
You see, in the whole writing there is no banyan tree mentioned at all.
No.
Amalaka trees.
The Amalakala trees.
Now, why hold on to the Amalaka tree? What else is Prabhupada saying? Prabhupada is writing about Tulsi. Prabhupada is writing about offering respect to the cows and the brahmanas and serving the Vaishnavas. So that is what Srila Prabhupada has taught us. Srila Prabhupada has taught us to worship the Tulsi, serve the Vaishnavas. That's it. So by doing that, then we are worshipping the banyan tree and everything else. Okay. So we have to, therefore, everything must be seen in light of the definition of pure devotional service that Rupa Goswami has given us. And what is that? Anushilanam. What is the meaning of anu in that definition?
For the pleasure of Krishna.
What is the meaning of anu in that anushilanam?
Follow.
Yes, to follow whom?
Follow the footsteps of great acharyas.
Yes, to follow the footsteps of the acharyas. So therefore, as Srila Prabhupada very often would say, we have to follow the immediate acharya. So we cannot jump. Okay, so just because here Rupa Goswami has said about banyan tree, it does not mean that from tomorrow we start worshipping the banyan tree. So we have to see what the acharya has said, the immediate acharya. Okay, so for us, the immediate acharya is Srila Prabhupada. And so we do what Srila Prabhupada has taught us and what Srila Prabhupada has instructed. So that is the system. That is how we follow things in parampara. Okay, so therefore Srila Prabhupada is making it very clear what we are supposed to do. And whatever Srila Prabhupada has instructed, we are supposed to do that, not concoct something else, even though it is mentioned in the scripture. Okay, now the next important point is giving up the company of non-devotees. I'm sure this must have been covered elaborately in the Nectar of Instruction, because Rupa Goswami in the Nectar of Instruction in both the second and the third verses is talking about association, right? In the second verse of the Nectar of Instruction, what is it saying? What is the second verse of the Nectar of Instruction?
Atyahara prayasascha.
Atyahara prayasascha.
Prajanto niyamagrahah. Janasangascha lauryam.
Janasanga means associating with materialistic people. So that will lead to decrease in the bhakti. Should be bhakti.
Vinashyati.
Okay, so pranishati. So the bhakti will decrease by that. And then next verse, what he says?
Sangatyagat sadam.
Sangatyagat. So giving up again the materialistic. So we find that Rupa Goswami is describing about association twice. And here again, Rupa Goswami is talking about giving up the company of non-devotees. So I'm sure it must have been discussed over there. So we will just go through some important points. So this is what Rupa Goswami is saying. And is giving some wonderful examples. Okay, somebody can read from the book, the first two paragraphs.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Giving up the company of non-devotees, do you want us to read? Lord
Yes,
Chaitanya
go
was once Lord Chaitanya was once asked by one of his householder devotees what the general behavior of a Vaishnava should be. In this connection, Lord Chaitanya replied that a Vaishnava should always give up the company of non-devotees. Then he explained that there are two kinds of non-devotees. One class is against the supremacy of Krishna and another class is too materialistic. In other words, those who are after material enjoyment and those who are against the supremacy of the Lord are called a Vaishnava, and their company should be strictly avoided. In the Katyayana Samhita, it is stated that even if one is forced to live within a cage of iron or in the midst of a blazing fire, he should accept this position rather than live with non-devotees who are through and through against the supremacy of the Lord. Similarly, in the Vishnu Rahasya, there is a statement to the effect that one should prefer to embrace a snake, a tiger, or an alligator rather than associate with persons who are worshippers of various demigods and who are impelled by material desire.
Right. So Mahaprabhu has given the definition of a Vaishnava as Asat Sangyag e Vaishnavachar. So Vaishnava is one who gives up the Asat Sang, who gives up the materialistic association. And we find that he's giving some very strong examples here. So why is he giving these examples? That it's better to live in a cage on fire or live with a snake or tiger than associate with materialistic persons. Why is he giving such strong examples? Because if one lives in a cage on fire, one is going to die.
Death is better than living without devotion.
Yes?
It's only saying that death is better than living without devotion.
So what happens when one associates with materialistic people?
You get entangled into karma, janma vritti, jara vyadhi cycle again and again.
Right. So therefore, he's saying it's better to die rather than live with materialistic people and lose the service attitudes. That's what happens in the association of materialistic people. One loses the service attitude, the attitude to serve Krishna, and rather one develops the attitude to enjoy sense gratification. And therefore, he's giving such strong examples. Okay, so in that connection, we have teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Rupa Goswami talking about the Bhakti Lata beach. We were discussing this before also, and the growth of the Bhakti Lata. So in that connection, there is this commentary. So somebody can read.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Is it audio clear, Prabhu?
Yes.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes. Giving up the company of non-devotees. While the bhakti creeper is growing, the devotees must protect it by fencing it all around. The neophyte devotee must be protected by being surrounded by pure devotees. In this way, he will not give the maddened elephant a chance to uproot his bhakti creeper. When one associates with non-devotees, the maddened elephant is set loose. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said, Asat Sanga Tyaga hai Vaishnava Achara. CC Madhya 2287. The first business of a Vaishnava is to give up the company of non-devotees. A so-called mature devotee, however, commits a great offense by giving up the company of pure devotees. The human being is a social animal, and if one gives up the society of pure devotees, he must associate with non-devotees, Asat Sangha. By contacting non-devotees and engaging non-devotional activities, a so-called mature devotee will fall victim to the mad elephant offense. Whatever growth has taken place is quickly uprooted by such an offense. One should therefore be very careful to defend the creeper by fencing it in. That is, by following the regulative principles and associating with pure devotees.
Yes. So here he's talking about how the Bhakti Lata must be protected. So just like an ordinary tree, a new sapling that we plant is protected by fencing. So similarly, the Bhakti Lata also needs to be protected by fencing. And what is that fencing? The fencing is following the regulative principles and associating with pure devotees. So this is how one's Bhakti Lata gets protected, by being in the association of devotees. And so Srila Prabhupada is explaining, if one gives up the association of devotees, one is bound to associate with non-devotees, because man is a social animal. So therefore, one needs some type of association. If one doesn't associate with devotees, one is bound to associate with non-devotees. And then when one associates with non-devotees, what happens? One loses respect for devotees. And when one loses respect for devotees, the next thing that happens is offenses. And that's why Prabhupada is writing that by contacting non-devotees and engaging in non-devotional activities, a so-called mature devotee will fall victim to the mad elephant offense. So Prabhupada uses this term, a so-called mature devotee, twice. Over here you can see, and even in other purports he uses this word, this phrase, so-called mature devotee. So usually new devotees, they are always very careful. New devotees are enthusiastic, they're careful because they think anyways we're new. And those who are actually advanced, they are also humble. So they also take a humble position. And so they are also careful and they are also strict. Now, those who land in trouble are who are in this category, so-called mature devotee. So they are not actually mature, but they imagine themselves to be very mature. And so if one is in this category, then it becomes very dangerous, because then he thinks, okay, I'm very advanced, I'm very mature, so I don't need the association of devotees, I can be on my own. So then he lands up in problem. Then he gives up the association of devotees, then he has to associate with non-devotees, and then all the problems begin. So therefore, it's very important that one is always in the association of devotees. So now somebody may ask the question, I'm sure this may have been discussed in Nectar of Instruction. So what does association mean? So somebody may say, oh, we have a jobs business, then we are with non-devotees. So what does association actually mean?
Always talking about Krishna and hearing about. Association means always talking about Krishna and hearing about Krishna.
So that is what, if you say always talking about Krishna, then somebody may say, oh, we are with in our jobs and companies, how can we always talk?
Dadati pratikrinati guhyam akhyati puchati.
Yes, that's correct. So that is association. Prabhupada speaks about this in his lectures. So association means 6 loving exchanges. So with whomever we do these 6 loving exchanges, then we are affected by that association. Priti Lakshana. So when there is Priti, when there is love, then we take the other person seriously, then we get affected by that association. But if there is no Priti, it is just official business, then one is not much affected by the other person. So to the degree we take the other person seriously, his thoughts, his views, and if we reveal confidential things to him, the more we go close to the other person, the more we get affected by that association. And so therefore, the important point about association is with whom we are doing these 6 loving exchanges. So as devotees, those 6 loving exchanges should be done only with devotees. Then we get affected by the devotee association. If we do them with non-devotees, we get affected by the non-devotee association. Okay, read this.
Sure, Prabhuji. Yeah. Even if one thinks that there are many pseudo-devotees or non-devotees in the Krishna conscious society, still one should stick to the society. If one thinks the society's members are not pure devotees, one can keep direct company with the spiritual master. And if there is any doubt, one should consult the spiritual master. However, unless one follows the spiritual master's instructions concerning the regulative principles and chanting and hearing the holy name of the Lord, one cannot become a pure devotee. By one's mental concoctions, one falls down. By associating with non-devotees, one breaks the regulative principles and is thereby lost.
Yes. So this is how Srila Prabhupada is emphasizing that devotee should remain within ISKCON. So here Prabhupada is writing that even if one thinks there are many pseudo-devotees or non-devotees in the Krishna Consciousness Society, which is of course not a fact, but sometimes we find devotees, they say that, oh, in the society there are no pure devotees. no senior devotees. So Prabhupada is saying, even if one thinks like that, which is not the case, but even if one thinks like that, still one should stick to the society. Okay, if one thinks that there are no pure devotees, then at least you think there's one pure devotee, your spiritual master, and you follow his instructions. So, as we know, His Holiness Bhakti Shastri Maharaj would often say that Srila Prabhupada gave him that instruction, never leave ISKCON. And of course, Srila Prabhupada didn't give only him that instruction. Right here in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is giving that instruction to all devotees of ISKCON. Always stick to the society. And in that connection, there is always, again, a very beautiful purport in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, 9th chapter, verse number 11. Where again, Srila Prabhupada, there we find that Dhruva Maharaj, even though he has darshan of the Supreme Lord, he's praying to the Lord for the association of devotees, where there is the river of the nectarian flow of Krishna Katha. And in that purport also, Srila Prabhupada is writing that anyone who thinks he can practice Krishna consciousness outside this society, that means the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, is living in a hallucination. It is impossible. Right, so that's how Srila Prabhupada gave great emphasis on staying within ISKCON and practicing devotional service. And so we have to be grateful to Srila Prabhupada for starting the society, for giving us an opportunity to be in the association of devotees and practice devotional service. And so therefore, it's very important for us to remain within ISKCON and practice devotional service. Okay, read this.
Yes, Prabhuji. One who is actually serious about advancing in devotional service should desire only to satisfy the previous acharyas. Ei chaya gosani yara muni tara dasa. One should always think of oneself as a servant of the acharyas. And thinking this, one should live in the society of Vaishnavas. CC Madhya 13.80. However, if one thinks that he has become very mature and can live separate from the association of Vaishnavas, and thus gives up all the regulative principles due to offending a Vaishnava, one's position becomes very dangerous. Offenses against the holy name are explained in Adilila chapter 8, verse 24. Giving up the regulative principles and living according to one's whims is compared to a mad elephant, which by force uproots the Bhaktilata and breaks it to pieces. In this way, the Bhaktilata shrivels up. Such an offense is especially created when one disobeys the instructions of the spiritual master. This is called Guru Avagya. The devotee must therefore be very careful not to commit offenses against the spiritual master by disobeying his instructions. As soon as one is deviated from the instructions of the spiritual master, the uprooting of the Bhaktilata begins. And gradually,
Yes, and gradually all the leaves dry.
Gradually all leaves dry.
Yes, so this is what happens when one associates with non-devotees. And one lives separate from the association of Vaishnavas, then one offends the Vaishnavas, he gives up the regulative principles, he commits offenses, disobeys the spiritual master, and that's how the Bhaktilata dries up. So therefore, one has to be always very careful to remain within the association, follow instructions. And then, as we already discussed this point before, that the Bhaktilata must be watered by the watering process of chanting and hearing, Shravanam Kirtanam. So that's how one waters the Bhaktilata in the association of devotees. And Prabhupada says, one stops, one certainly falls down from devotional service. Prabhupada says here, although one may be very much exalted in devotional service, he should not give up the watering process of Shravan Kirtan. If one gives up that process, it is due to an offense. Okay, please note this point. Although one may be very much exalted in devotional service, he should not give up the process. Okay, so now we go to the last anga of bhakti that is present in this chapter. So there are three actually, but anyway, it's put under one. Not accepting unfit disciples, constructing many temples, or reading many books. So somebody can read from the book. Of course, it's not the last item in the chapter, but it's the major one. Somebody can read from the book.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Not accepting unfit disciples, constructing many temples, or reading many books. Another stricture is that a person may have many disciples, but he should not act in such a way that he will be obliged to any of them for some particular action or some favor. And one should also not be very enthusiastic about constructing new temples, nor should one be enthusiastic about reading various types of books, save and except the ones which lead to the advancement of devotional service. Practically, if one very carefully reads Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and this nectar of devotion, that will give him sufficient knowledge to understand the science of Krishna consciousness. One need not take the trouble of reading other books. In the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 13th chapter, verse 8, Narad Muni, while discussing with Maharaj Yudhishthira the various functions of the different orders in society, especially mentions rules for the sannyasis, those persons who have renounced this material world. One who has accepted the sannyasa order of life is forbidden to accept a disciple, anyone who is not fit. A sannyasi should first of all examine whether a prospective student is sincerely seeking Krishna consciousness. If he is not, he should not be accepted. However, Lord Chaitanya's causeless mercy is such that he advised all bona fide spiritual masters to speak about Krishna consciousness everywhere. Therefore, in the line of Lord Chaitanya, even the sannyasis can speak about Krishna consciousness everywhere. And if someone is seriously inclined to become a disciple, the sannyasis always accept him. The one point is that without increasing the number of disciples, there is no propagation of the cult of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, sometimes, even at a risk, a sannyasi is in the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu may accept even a person who is not thoroughly fit to become a disciple. Later on, by the mercy of such a bona fide spiritual master, the disciple is gradually elevated. However, if one increases the number of disciples simply for some prestige or false honor, he will surely fall down in the matter of executing Krishna consciousness. Similarly, a bona fide spiritual master has no business reading many books simply to show his proficiency or to get popularity by lecturing in different places. One should avoid all these things. It is also stated that a sannyasi should not be enthusiastic about constructing temples. We can see in the lives of various acharyas in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that they are not very enthusiastic about constructing temples. However, if somebody comes forward to offer some service, the same reluctant acharya will encourage the building of costly temples by such servitors. For example, Rupa Goswami was offered a favor by Maharaj Man Singh, the commander-in-chief of Emperor Akbar, and Rupa Goswami instructed him to construct a large temple of Govindji, which cost vast amounts of money. So a bona fide spiritual master should not personally take any responsibility for constructing temples. But if someone has money and wants to spend it in the service of Krishna, an acharya like Rupa Goswami may utilize the devotees' money to construct a nice, costly temple for the service of the Lord. Unfortunately, it happens that someone who is not fit to become a spiritual master may approach wealthy persons to contribute for temple constructions. If such money is utilized by unqualified spiritual master for living comfortably in costly temples without actually doing any preaching work, this is not acceptable. In other words, a spiritual master needn't be very enthusiastic for constructing temple buildings simply in the name of so-called spiritual advancement. Rather, his first and foremost activity should be to preach. In this connection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj recommended that a spiritual master print books. If one has money, instead of constructing costly temples, one should spend his money for the publication of authorized books in different languages for propagating the Krishna consciousness movement. Hare Krishna.
Okay, so that was the instruction of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to our Srila Prabhupada. Okay, that is what you see on the screen, which is from the Lilamrit. So somebody can read from the screen now.
Hare Krishna. Unfit disciples are costly temples. Agun Jwalbe. There will be fire. One day there would be fire in the Calcutta Gaudiya Math, and that fire of party interests would spread and destroy. When we were living in a rented house, if we could collect 200 or 300 rupees, we were living very happy, very nicely at Ultadanga. We were happier then. But since we have been given this marble palace in Bagh Bazaar, there is friction between our men. Who will occupy this room? Who will occupy that room? Who will be the proprietor of this room? Everyone is planning in different ways. Hare Krishna.
Continue.
It would be better to take the marble from the walls and secure money. If I could do this and print books, that would be better. Abhay felt his spiritual master speaking to him in urgency, as if asking him for help or warning him to avert disaster. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta then said directly to Abhay, Amar Ichha Chila Kichu Bhai Karana. I had a desire to print some books. If you ever get money, print books. Standing by Radha Kunda and beholding his spiritual master, Abhay felt the words deeply enter his own life. If you ever get money, print books. Srila Prabhupada.
Yes. So here we find these three angas of bhakti that Rupa Goswami is speaking about: not accepting unfit disciples, constructing many temples, or reading many books. There's no problem with these activities per se, but what is important is what is the consciousness behind them. So if one is accepting too many disciples, unfit disciples, simply to make a big show, or again, if one is constructing many temples just to lead a comfortable life without preaching, or if one is reading too many books again to make a show of scholarship, then that is condemned. But if one is having the right motive, then that is fine. But in any case, the Prabhupada is writing, as far as reading books is concerned, Prabhupada is writing, if one very carefully reads, please note, very carefully. So if one very carefully, because that makes a whole lot of difference. If one reads carefully, then even the same book, the same sentence could reveal so many things. If one very carefully reads Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, teachings of Lord Chaitanya, that time Chaitanya Charitamrita was not there, but we can say Chaitanya Charitamrita and this nectar of devotion, that will give him sufficient knowledge to understand the science of consciousness. One need not take the trouble of reading other books. Okay, so of course, reading Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita and Bhagavad Gita, that itself is a lifelong service. As Srila Prabhupada himself said, one lifetime is not sufficient to read these books. So one need not try to read too many other books. So one can read some books as reference books, but just reading Srila Prabhupada's books is so voluminous. And as Prabhupada is writing here, that will give him sufficient knowledge to understand the science of Krishna consciousness, sufficient knowledge. One need not take the trouble. So reading other books is actually a trouble. So one should be satisfied just reading Srila Prabhupada's books. And one should have that full faith and conviction that if I simply carefully reads, not superficial reading, carefully reads, or as Prabhupada himself said, scrutinizingly reads Srila Prabhupada's books, and that is sufficient. Then one can read these same books 100 times over and over again, but one will never get bored, because when one reads carefully, then every time one reads, one will get a new explanation and a new realization by reading. Okay, and then of course, as far as constructing temples and unfit disciples, these are instructions mainly for gurus, sannyasis, and again, as we already mentioned, that the important point is in what is the mood behind doing these activities. Okay, fine. So, and there are a few more items in the chapter which you can read, those simple ones. And see, the eighth chapter, offenses to be avoided, is basically a list of offenses. Okay, a huge big list of offenses, especially offenses in deity worship, seva prads, and nama prads are also there. Nama prads, of course, most of us are aware of nama prads. So, but my request is, please go through this chapter. It's a list of offenses. So you go through this chapter, and next time we will take questions on both the 7th and 8th chapters. If you have any questions, you can ask questions, clarifications next time, and then we will proceed ahead with the 9th chapter. All right?
Okay. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Okay, fine. So we'll stop for today. If you have questions, you can ask in the next class. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Rupa Goswami Pad ki jai, Sri Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu ki jai, Samved Gaur Bhakti ki jai. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,
Hare Hare.
Thank you, Vamsi.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.